when the Galactic Council declared humanity too primitive to join the alliance against the Void Reapers. They never imagined that a single human vessel would become their last hope. While alien fleets fell like dominoes across the galaxy, something about human unpredictability and stubborn refusal to accept defeat would prove that sometimes the most underestimated species holds the key to salvation. What makes one battered human ship more dangerous than entire alien armadas? The answer lies not in superior technology, but in something the galaxy has never encountered before: human desperation married to ingenuity and the terrifying lengths humans will go to protect what they love. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the holographic display show the complete destruction of the Centauri Defense Fleet. 27 ships reduced to burning debris in less than 4 minutes. The Void Reapers moved through space like a plague, their black vessels absorbing light itself as they consumed everything in their path. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from Admiral Korvac of the Galactic Council," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. His voice carried the weight of defeat that had settled over every surviving ship in the galaxy. Sarah straightened her uniform and nodded. The holographic image of Admiral Korvac materialized before her, his insectoid features twitching with what humans had learned to recognize as extreme distress. Behind him, the council chambers buzzed with dozens of alien species, all speaking in urgent, panicked voices. "Captain Chun," Korvac's translated voice crackled through the universal translator. "The situation has become dire. The Void Reapers have broken through our final defensive line at the Nexus Gate. Our combined fleets have suffered 97% casualties." Sarah felt her stomach drop, but kept her expression neutral. "What about the evacuation protocols, Admiral? The civilian populations?" "That is why I contact you." Korvac's compound eyes focused on her with desperate intensity. "Your species was denied entry into our alliance because your technology was deemed insufficient. Your ship's primitive, your weapons inadequate." He paused, and Sarah could hear the bitter irony in his voice. "Now you are all that remains." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Sarah's crew of 43 humans aboard the Defiance suddenly represented one of the last military assets left in the galaxy. It would have been laughable if it weren't so terrifying. "Admiral, with respect, you have ships that can travel faster than light in minutes. Your weapons can crack planets. Our ship barely survived the journey to this sector using technology your people consider obsolete. What exactly do you expect us to do?" Korvac's translator struggled with what sounded like a sound of desperation. "Captain, in the past 72 hours, we have observed something unprecedented. Every engagement with the Void Reapers follows the same pattern. They analyze our technology, adapt their defenses, and systematically eliminate our forces using our own tactics against us. But humans..." He paused. "Humans fight differently." Sarah exchanged glances with her first officer, Commander Marcus Webb. Webb raised an eyebrow that perfectly expressed what they were all thinking. Different was one way to put it. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy for being unpredictable, stubborn, and occasionally suicidal in their tactical decisions. 3 weeks ago, Korvac continued, "Your convoy encountered a Void Reaper scout vessel near the Tau Ceti system. According to all tactical analysis, your ships should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, you somehow managed to disable it. How?" Sarah remembered that encounter vividly. They had been escorting a group of human colonists when a massive black ship appeared. Instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, they had done something no alien species would consider logical. They had rammed it. Not with their ship, but with their cargo containers loaded with industrial mining explosives, turning their own supplies into weapons. "We improvised, Admiral. It's something humans do when we don't have better options. Improvisation." Korvac's translator made the word sound like a foreign concept. "Our analysts have studied your species' military history. Your tactics are often inefficient, sometimes wasteful, and frequently dangerous to your own forces. Yet you consistently achieve victory against superior enemies." His voice dropped. The Void Reapers cannot adapt to strategies that have no logical foundation. Commander Webb stepped forward. Admiral, are you asking us to engage an enemy that just destroyed the most powerful fleets in the galaxy? Our ship has 43 crew members and weapons that your people consider antiques. I'm asking you to buy time. The civilian evacuation fleets need 6 hours to reach the sanctuary systems beyond the galactic rim. If the Void Reapers reach the Nexus hub, they will cut off all escape routes. Korvac's image flickered as explosions lit up the background of his transmission. You're not being asked to win, Captain Shun. You are being asked to delay the inevitable long enough for millions of civilians to escape. Sarah looked around her bridge. Torres at Communications, barely 24 years old and fresh out of Earth Naval Academy. Chief Engineer Martinez, who could make their aging fusion reactors perform miracles with spare parts and determination. Weapons Officer Kim, who had somehow managed to jury-rig their missile systems to pack 3 times their normal punch. Navigator Singh, who knew stellar cartography better than most computers. They were all looking at her with the same expression, scared but ready. It was the look humans got when asked to do something impossible. Admiral, you said the evacuation needs 6 hours. How long do your tactical projections give us? Against the Void Reaper main fleet? Korvac's mandibles clicked nervously. Approximately 7 minutes. Sarah almost laughed. 7 minutes to hold off an enemy that had just steamrolled the combined might of dozens of advanced civilizations. But, as she looked at her crew, she saw something the Galactic Council had never understood about humans. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't surrender. They got creative. Martinez, she called her chief engineer. How much antimatter do we have left? About 4 kilograms, Captain. Enough for maybe 2 hours of full combat power or 6 hours of standard operations. What if we didn't use it for power? Martinez's eyes widened as he understood her implication. Ma'am, antimatter isn't designed to be weaponized on this scale. The containment systems alone. Can you do it? The engineer grinned with the kind of mad enthusiasm that made other species nervous about humans. Give me 20 minutes and some creative interpretation of safety protocols. Sarah turned back to Admiral Korvac. Admiral, we'll need complete tactical data on every Void Reaper engagement. Every ship design they've encountered, every weapon system they've adapted to, every strategy they've countered. Captain, such information would take hours to transmit and analyze. We don't have hours. Send everything to our ship's computer. My crew can process it while we're moving. Sarah moved to her command chair. And Admiral, you might want to warn any allied ships in this sector to maintain a very safe distance. Human tactics tend to be explosive. As Korvac's transmission ended, Sarah turned to her crew. They were already moving with the efficient urgency that came from months of fighting alongside each other in a hostile galaxy. The Defiance might be primitive by galactic standards, but her crew knew how to make every system work beyond its design limits. Navigator Singh, plot a course for the Nexus Gate. Maximum burn. Captain. ETA, 47 minutes. Weapons Officer Kim, I want every missile we have armed and ready. And start working with Martinez on those special modifications we discussed. Ma'am, those modifications have never been tested. Today seems like a good day to test them. Sarah settled into her command chair. Torres, open a channel to all hands. The ship-wide communication system crackled to life. All hands, this is the captain. In 47 minutes, we're going to engage an enemy that just destroyed the most powerful military forces in known space. They've adapted to every conventional weapon and strategy they've encountered. She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. Fortunately, there's nothing conventional about what we're about to do. Through the viewports, she could see the stars beginning to shift as they entered their high-speed burn toward the Nexus Gate. Somewhere ahead of them, the Void Reapers were advancing toward their final objective, confident that nothing could stop them. They had analyzed and countered every weapon, every tactic, every strategy the galaxy's finest military minds could devise. But they had never encountered humans at their most dangerous. when they had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. As the Defiance accelerated toward what every logical analysis said would be their destruction, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving Earth: hope. The Void Reapers had spent months learning how civilized species fought wars. They were about to learn how humans ended them. And in the chaos that was about to unfold at the Nexus Gate, the galaxy would discover why sometimes the most primitive solution was exactly what the situation required. Behind them, 6 hours of civilian evacuation ships began their desperate flight toward the galactic rim. Ahead of them, an enemy that had never known defeat prepared to claim their final victory. Between them, 43 humans aboard a ship held together by determination and engineering miracles prepared to prove that sometimes the smallest forces could cast the longest shadows. The countdown to contact began, and with it, the galaxy's last best hope for survival. The Void Reaper fleet emerged from hyperspace like a spreading shadow across the star field. Captain Sarah Chan watched from the bridge of the Defiance as 37 black vessels materialized near the Nexus Gate, their hulls seeming to absorb the light from nearby stars. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built, their alien geometry defying conventional understanding of space combat design. Jesus Vispirit Navigator Sim. Those things are massive. Contact in 12 minutes, reported Lieutenant Torres. Ma'am, I'm reading some kind of scanning beam sweeping this sector. They're analyzing our ship, said Commander Webb grimly. Same pattern they used against the Centauri fleet. Sarah nodded, watching the tactical display update as the enemy vessels spread into formation. The Void Reapers moved with perfect coordination, like components of a single organism. Each ship positioned itself to create overlapping fields of fire that would eliminate any conventional attack route. Martinez, how are those modifications coming? Almost done, Captain. The chief engineer's voice came through the comm system from the engine room. But I have to warn you, what we're about to do will probably destroy our antimatter containment system. We'll get one shot at this. One shot is all we need. Kim, status on our special delivery systems? Weapons Officer Kim looked up from her console, her face flushed with the intense concentration of someone performing impossible calculations. I've stripped the guidance systems from 8 of our missiles and loaded them with the modified antimatter charges. They'll fly blind, but the explosive yield will be. She paused. Well, let's just say it'll be memorable. Good. What about conventional weapons? 32 standard missiles, all armed and targeted. But, Captain, our weapons are designed to fight human ships. Against their armor. I know. That's why we're not fighting their ships. Sarah pulled up the tactical data Admiral Korvac had sent them. Hours of analysis compressed into minutes of desperate planning. Look at the pattern. Every engagement, the Void Reapers adapt to their enemy's weapons and tactics within the first few minutes of contact. They learn, they counter, they destroy. Commander Webb studied the data flowing across his screen. So how do we fight an enemy that can't be surprised? By doing something so stupid they can't believe we're actually doing it. Sarah highlighted a section of the Nexus Gate structure on the main display. They're positioning themselves to defend against an attack on their fleet. What they're not expecting is an attack on the gate itself. The bridge fell silent as her crew processed the implications. The Nexus Gate was one of the galaxy's most critical infrastructure points, a massive artificial structure that allowed faster-than-light travel between star systems. It was also the size of a small moon and heavily shielded. Ma'am, Torres said carefully, destroying the Nexus Gate would trap the Void Reapers in this system, but it would also trap any surviving ships, including us. Sarah turned to face her crew. The evacuation fleets will reach the sanctuary systems whether this gate exists or not. They have their own hyperspace drives. But if the Void Reapers control this gate, they can pursue those fleets and systematically hunt down every survivor. She paused. If the gate is destroyed, they're stuck here. The nearest alternative route to the sanctuary systems would take them 3 months to travel. 3 months, Webb repeated slowly. That's enough time for the civilians to establish defenses, maybe even mount a counterattack. Exactly. The Void Reapers win by speed and overwhelming force. Take away their mobility, and they become just another enemy fleet in an empty system. Singh pulled up stellar navigation charts. Captain, the Nexus Gate's power core is located in the central hub, about 15 kilometers down from the main structure surface. The entire thing is protected by energy shields that could stop a planetary bombardment. What about internal access routes? There are maintenance tunnels and service corridors throughout the structure. But, ma'am, those passages are designed for repair drones, not human-sized personnel. Sarah studied the gate's technical specifications. The structure was massive, ancient, and built by a civilization that had vanished thousands of years before humanity discovered fire. But like all technology, it had weaknesses. Martinez, could you rig a small antimatter charge to overload the gate's power core from inside? Theoretically, yes, but someone would have to manually deliver it to the core chamber and set the detonation sequence. The energy feedback from the core would prevent any remote triggering. The implications hung in the air like a death sentence. A suicide mission to the heart of the galaxy's most important structure, while an enemy fleet that had never known defeat closed in for the kill. Contact in 7 minutes, Torres announced. The Void Reapers are moving into attack formation. Sarah made her decision. Kim, prepare a boarding pod with one of the modified antimatter charges. Singh, calculate an approach vector that uses the gate structure to mask our approach. Webb, you have command while I'm gone. Wait. Commander Webb stood up from his station. Captain, you can't seriously be planning to. Someone has to deliver that charge, Marcus. And I'm not ordering any of my crew on a suicide mission. With respect, ma'am, you're not going alone. Martinez's voice came through the comm from engineering. You'll need someone who understands antimatter containment to set the charge properly. Besides, those maintenance tunnels are tight quarters. You'll need backup. Before Sarah could protest, Kim spoke up. Captain, if you're going into the gate structure, you'll need someone who knows weapons systems to help navigate the security measures. She was already strapping on her sidearm. I volunteer. This is not a democracy, Sarah said firmly. I need you all here to do what? Singh interrupted. Ma'am, once you destroy that gate, our mission is complete whether we survive or not. But you'll need help getting to the core chamber. He pulled up the internal gate schematics. These passages branch in 17 different directions. One wrong turn, and you'll be lost in there for hours. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Young, determined, and absolutely refusing to let her face this alone. It was exactly the kind of stubborn loyalty that made other species shake their heads in bewilderment at human behavior. Fina, Martinez, and Singh come with me. Webb, Kim, and Torres hold the ship. She moved toward the exit. Your job is to keep those Void Reapers busy while we're inside the gate structure. Make them focus on you. How exactly do we do that? Kim asked. Sarah paused at the bridge entrance. Remember what Admiral Korvac said about human tactics being illogical? Time to prove him right. When those Void Reapers scan our ship, they're going to see obsolete weapons, primitive technology, and a crew that should surrender. She smiled grimly. Instead, they're going to see humans doing what humans do best, something so insane it might actually work. Contact in 4 minutes, Torres called out. They're charging weapons. Launch the boarding pod as soon as we're in range of the gate structure. Then, start your attack run. Sarah headed for the exit. And remember, our goal isn't to win. It's to be so annoying and unpredictable that they can't ignore us long enough for us to reach the core chamber. As the captain left the bridge, Commander Webb settled into the command chair and looked at his remaining crew. Kim at weapons, Torres at communications, and a skeleton crew throughout the ship, against an enemy that had just destroyed the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. Well, he said quietly, this should be interesting. Through the main view screen, the Void Reaper fleet continued its approach, weapons charging with energy that could vaporize continents. Their formation was perfect, their tactics proven, their victory inevitable. They had no idea they were about to encounter humans at their most dangerous. Not when they were winning, but when they were desperate enough to try anything. In the next few minutes, the Void Reapers would learn that sometimes the most primitive species in the galaxy possess something no amount of technology could replicate: the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The countdown continued, and with each passing second, the galaxy's fate balanced on the actions of a handful of humans who had decided that if they were going to die, they were going to make it count. The boarding pod launched toward the Nexus Gate, while the Defiance accelerated directly toward the Void Reaper fleet, her crew preparing to prove that courage and insanity were often indistinguishable. The boarding pod shuddered as it approached the Nexus Gate's docking port, its hull barely large enough for 3 humans and their equipment. Captain Sarah Chun gripped the safety harness as Chief Engineer Martinez worked frantically to override the gate's security systems, while Navigator Singh plotted their route through the maintenance tunnels. "Breach in 30 seconds, Martinez announced, his fingers dancing over the control interface. "The antimatter charge is stable, but we'll need to move fast once we're inside. The gate's internal sensors will detect our presence within minutes." Through the pod's small viewport, Sarah could see the Defiance beginning its attack run against the Void Reaper fleet. The human ship looked impossibly small against the enemy formation, like a single fighter plane charging a fleet of battleships. "Singh, how long to reach the core chamber?" 17 minutes if we don't get lost. 26 minutes if we encounter security systems. 38 minutes if the tunnels are damaged." Singh's voice was steady despite the circumstances. "Ma'am, there's something else. The gate's power core operates at temperatures that would kill us in minutes without environmental suits." "Which we don't have," Martinez added grimly. "The boarding pod's emergency gear includes basic breathing apparatus and radiation shielding, but nothing designed for that kind of heat." Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Another variable they hadn't planned for. But before she could respond, Lieutenant Torres's voice crackled through their communications. "Captain, you need to see this. The Void Reapers aren't moving to intercept us." Sarah activated her communicator. "What do you mean?" "They're maintaining defensive formation around the gate. It's like they're waiting for something." Commander Webb's voice joined the conversation. "Captain, we're picking up massive energy readings from their fleet. They're not charging conventional weapons. It's something else." Through the pod systems, Sarah accessed the Defiance's sensor feed. The Void Reaper ships remained in perfect formation, but energy was building within their hulls. Not the focused beams of traditional weapons, but something that seemed to pulse through their entire fleet structure. "They're not trying to destroy us," she realized with growing dread. "They're trying to capture us. Mom." Think about it. Every other engagement, they destroyed their enemies quickly. But we're the first humans they've encountered in direct combat. They want to study us, learn how we think, how we fight. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If they capture our ship and crew alive, they'll learn everything about human tactics and psychology. Singh finished. Then they'll know how to counter anything humans throw at them. The boarding pod's impact with the gate's docking port interrupted their conversation. Martinez immediately began cutting through the access hatch while Sarah and Singh prepared their equipment. The modified antimatter charge was contained in a device no larger than a briefcase, but its destructive potential was beyond calculation. "Hatch is open," Martinez reported. "Internal atmosphere is breathable, but the temperature is already elevated. We'll have maybe 40 minutes before heat exposure becomes critical." They crawled through the access hatch into a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for a human body. The walls hummed with energy, and the air carried the sharp ozone smell of massive electrical systems. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie blue glow. "This way," Singh whispered, consulting his navigation device. "The main power conduit is 3 levels down and half a kilometer toward the gate center." They began moving through the tunnel system, a maze of passages that branched and intersected in patterns that defied human understanding. The gate had been built by an ancient civilization with completely different concepts of space and efficiency. What seemed like a direct route often led to dead ends, while seemingly impossible passages opened into vast chambers. Meanwhile, aboard the Defiance, Commander Webb watched the Void Reaper fleet with growing unease. The enemy ships maintained their formation, but energy continued to build within their hulls. Tendrils of some unknown force began extending between the vessels, creating a web of power that encompassed the entire fleet. Kim, were you reading on those energy signatures? Weapons Officer Kim studied her instruments with a frown. Sir, it's unlike anything in our database. The energy pattern is consistent with some kind of containment field, but on a massive scale. If I had to guess, they're building a net, Torres finished. Something to capture our ship intact. Webb nodded grimly. How long until they're ready? Based on the energy buildup rate, approximately 15 minutes. 15 minutes until the Void Reapers could capture the Defiance and her crew. 15 minutes to learn everything about human military capabilities and psychology. 15 minutes until humanity's greatest advantage, unpredictability, became irrelevant. Change of plans, Webb announced. Kim, arm all remaining missiles with standard warheads. Target the space between their ships, not the ships themselves. Sir, that won't cause significant damage to their vessels. It's not supposed to. We're going to disrupt their energy web before it can form completely. Webb turned to Torres. Send a message to the captain. Tell her we're going to buy them more time, but she needs to move faster. In the maintenance tunnels, Sarah received Webb's message as they reached a junction that opened into a larger chamber. The space was filled with massive conduits carrying power to various gate systems, and the temperature had risen noticeably. We're running out of time, she told Martinez and Singh. How much further? Singh checked his navigation device, but the readings were becoming erratic due to the increasing electromagnetic interference. The heat is affecting our instruments. I think we're close, but I can't be certain. Martinez was examining the power conduits with growing excitement. Captain, look at this. These energy feeds are routed directly from the main core. If we follow this conduit backward, we'll reach the core chamber faster than using the maintenance tunnels, Sarah realized. How do we access the conduit system? Very carefully. One wrong move, and we'll be electrocuted by enough power to light up a small planet. They began following the massive conduit through a series of access chambers that grew progressively hotter and more dangerous. The walls themselves began to glow with residual energy, and the air became almost too thick to breathe. Above them, the Defiance launched its desperate attack against the Void Reaper fleet. Missiles streaked through space, detonating in the spaces between enemy vessels and disrupting the energy web they were attempting to construct. The Void Reapers responded by redirecting some of their power to defensive systems, but they continued building their capture net. It's working, Kim reported. Their energy web is destabilizing, but they're compensating. We bought maybe 5 more minutes. That'll have to be enough, Webb replied. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Once they realize their capture system is compromised, they're going to try destroying us instead. In the depths of the Nexus Gate, Sarah and her team finally reached the core chamber. The space was vast and filled with machinery that defied description. Crystalline structures that pulsed with energy, geometric forms that seemed to shift and change as they watched, and at the center, a sphere of pure energy that contained enough power to fuel faster-than-light travel for thousands of ships. My God, whispered Singh. It's beautiful. The chamber was also lethally hot. Even with their protective gear, they could feel the temperature rising beyond safe levels. They had minutes before heat exposure became fatal. Martinez, can you place the charge? Working on it now. The engineer approached the central power sphere with the antimatter device. The containment field around the core is incredibly strong. I'll need to find a weak point in the energy matrix. As Martinez worked, Sarah monitored the battle above through her communicator. The Defiance was taking damage now, her hull scoring from near misses as the Void Reapers switched from capture mode to destruction. But Webb was keeping the ship moving, using every trick of human piloting to stay ahead of enemy targeting. "Captain," Torres's voice was strained. "Hull integrity at 60%. We can't take much more of this." "Martinez, how much longer?" "Almost there. The charge is in position, but I need to manually calibrate the detonation sequence to match the core's energy frequency. If I get it wrong, the antimatter will just be absorbed by the containment field." Sarah felt sweat pouring down her face from the intense heat. Singh was beginning to show signs of heat exhaustion, and even Martinez's hands were shaking from the temperature extremes. "Done," Martinez announced. "Charge is set for a 30-second delay. Once I activate it, we'll have half a minute to get clear of the chamber." "How far do we need to be?" Martinez looked at the size of the chamber and the power readings from the core. "Honestly, probably further than we can get in 30 seconds. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the gate structure as the battle above intensified. The Void Reapers had abandoned their capture attempt and were now systematically destroying the Defiance with concentrated fire. The human ship was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and running out of time. "Do it," Sarah ordered. Martinez activated the antimatter charge. The device began a soft countdown that seemed impossibly loud in the energy-filled chamber. 30 seconds until the most important structure in the galaxy was reduced to expanding plasma. They ran toward the access tunnel, but the heat was becoming unbearable. Singh collapsed after 10 steps, overcome by the temperature. Sarah and Martinez dragged him toward the tunnel entrance as the countdown reached 15 seconds. Above them, the Defiance shuddered under the impact of enemy weapons. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space, and entire sections of the ship went dark. But Commander Webb kept the ship moving, determined to give his captain every possible second to complete her mission. 10 seconds to detonation, Martinez reported as they reached the tunnel. "Captain, even if we survive the initial blast, the energy feedback is going to cook everything in a 50-kilometer radius." Sarah looked back at the pulsing core chamber, then at her two companions who had followed her on what they all knew was a suicide mission. "Then, we better make sure it counts." The countdown reached 0, and in the heart of the Nexus Gate, antimatter met the fundamental forces that held the galaxy together. What happened next would change the course of the war and prove that sometimes the most desperate actions could achieve the impossible. The antimatter detonation in the Nexus Gate's core chamber created a cascade reaction that defied every law of physics the galaxy thought it understood. Captain Sarah Chun felt the tunnel walls around her begin to vibrate as energy feedback from the explosion raced through the gate's superstructure at the speed of light. "Move!" she shouted, dragging Navigator Singh toward what she hoped was safety. Chief Engineer Martinez stumbled behind them, his instruments screaming warnings about radiation levels and structural collapse. Above them, the first shock wave reached the gate's exterior surface. Commander Webb watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the massive structure began to glow from within, its ancient metal hull expanding and contracting like a living thing in agony. "What the hell did they do down there?" whispered Weapons Officer Kim. "Something impossible," Webb replied, watching the energy readings spike beyond their instrument's ability to measure. All hands braced for impact. The Void Reaper fleet, which had been closing in for the kill, suddenly found themselves facing a new and unprecedented threat. The Nexus Gate, which had been a stable fixture in space for thousands of years, was now radiating energy on a scale that dwarfed their most powerful weapons. Alarms sounded throughout their vessels as their adaptive technology struggled to analyze what was happening. For the first time since their campaign began, the Void Reapers encountered something they couldn't immediately understand or counter. The energy patterns emerging from the gate matched known technology in their vast database of conquered civilizations. It was crude, primitive, and completely unpredictable. In the maintenance tunnels, Sarah's team felt the temperature spike to levels that would have been instantly fatal without their protective gear. The walls around them began to crack as the gate's structural integrity failed under the stress of containing forces it was never designed to handle. There, Singh pointed through the smoke and energy discharge at an emergency evacuation pod built into the tunnel wall. If we can reach it, they stumbled toward the pod as the tunnel collapsed behind them. Martinez's equipment bag caught on a piece of twisted metal, and he had to abandon it to squeeze through the pod's access hatch. Behind them, the sounds of the gate's death throes grew louder and more violent. The evacuation pod was designed for maintenance crews, with barely enough life support for 3 people for a few hours. As Sarah activated the emergency launch sequence, she could see through the small viewport that the gate's exterior was now glowing like a star. Pod launch in 10 seconds, the automated system announced. Warning, exterior environment hostile. Survival probability minimal. I love human engineering, Martinez muttered. Always so optimistic. The pod launched just as the next energy pulse raced through the gate structure. They were thrown clear of the collapsing superstructure and into open space where they could finally see the full scope of what they had accomplished. The Nexus gate was dying, not just failing, but transforming into something that resembled a miniature supernova. Energy cascaded from its core in waves that distorted space itself, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled at nearby matter. The Void Reaper fleet, which moments before had been in perfect attack formation, was now struggling to maintain position against the chaotic forces being unleashed. Captain, Singh said weakly, pointing at his instruments. The energy output is continuing to increase. I don't think the reaction is stopping. Sarah watched the readings with growing amazement and horror. The antimatter charge had been designed to destroy the gate's power core, cutting off faster-than-light travel through this region. Instead, it had somehow turned the entire structure into an unstable energy source that was growing more powerful by the minute. Martinez, is this what you expected? No. The core should have just exploded. This is something else entirely. The engineer studied the energy patterns with professional fascination. It's like the antimatter didn't just destroy the core, it destabilized the fundamental forces holding the gate together. The whole structure is essentially becoming a controlled black hole. Aboard the Defiance, Lieutenant Torres was receiving frantic communications from across the sector. Commander Webb, I'm getting emergency signals from ships throughout the system. The gravitational distortions are affecting navigation systems up to 3 light-years away. What about the Void Reapers? Kim studied her tactical display with amazement. Sir, they're retreating. No, that's not right. They're being pulled toward the gate by the gravitational field. They're trying to break free, but their propulsion systems can't overcome the pull. Webb felt a surge of hope. The enemy fleet that had seemed invincible was now trapped by the very structure they had come to capture. But even as he watched, the Void Reapers began adapting to their new situation. Their ships reconfigured themselves, extending energy fields between vessels to combine their propulsion power. They're going to escape, he realized. All they need is enough combined thrust to reach the edge of the gravitational field. How long do we have? At their current rate of adaptation, maybe 20 minutes. 20 minutes before the Void Reapers broke free and continued their campaign of conquest. The gate's destruction had bought time, but not nearly enough. The civilian evacuation fleets were still hours away from reaching the sanctuary systems. Webb made a decision that would have seemed insane to any rational analysis. Kim, target our remaining missiles on the gate structure itself. Sir, the gate is already unstable. Any additional damage might cause a total collapse. Exactly. Webb settled into the command chair. If we can cause the gate to collapse completely, it'll create a black hole that'll trap the Void Reapers permanently. They'll never be able to pursue the evacuation fleets. Commander, a black hole that size would consume everything in this system, including us. Webb looked around the bridge at his remaining crew. Young faces marked by exhaustion and determination. They had followed their captain into an impossible situation and were now being asked to sacrifice everything to protect people they would never meet. I know, he said quietly. "But sometimes that's what it takes." Kim nodded slowly and began targeting calculations. "All missiles armed and ready, sir. Impact in 40 seconds." In their evacuation pod, Sarah watched the Defiance launch its final attack. She understood immediately what Webb was attempting, and felt a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Her crew was about to prove the final point about human nature that the galaxy needed to learn. "Can we reach them?" she asked Martinez. "Not in this pod. We don't have the propulsion power to fight the gravitational field." Sarah activated her communicator. "Marcus, this is Sarah. What are you doing?" Webb's voice came through clearly despite the energy interference. "Finishing the job, Captain. The Void Reapers are adapting faster than we expected. This is the only way to stop them permanently. There has to be another way. Maybe, but we don't have time to find it." Webb paused. "Sarah, it's been an honor serving with you. Tell Earth what happened here. Tell them why it mattered." The missiles struck the gate structure at its most unstable points. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The controlled energy release became uncontrolled, and the gravitational field began collapsing inward with irresistible force. The Void Reaper fleet, which had been slowly working free of the gravitational trap, suddenly found themselves being pulled inexorably toward what was rapidly becoming a true black hole. Their adaptive technology scrambled to find a solution, but there was no countering the fundamental forces of the universe. For the first time since their campaign began, the Void Reapers transmitted what their computers could only classify as a distress signal. They had conquered dozens of civilizations through superior technology and tactical adaptation. But humans had shown them something beyond technology, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the survival of others. The Defiance was also caught in the gravitational collapse, her hull beginning to stretch and deform under tidal forces. But instead of trying to escape, Webb ordered his ship to maintain position between the Void Reapers and the edge of the gravitational field. "Sir," Torres reported, "they're trying to use our ship's mass as a gravitational anchor to pull themselves free. Not if we can help it." Webb turned to Kim. "Do we have any power left in the engines?" "About 30 seconds of emergency thrust." "Use it. Take us directly into the center of the collapse." The Defiance accelerated toward the forming black hole, her engines screaming with the effort of fighting gravitational forces that could crush planets. Behind her, the Void Reaper fleet made one final attempt to escape, their combined propulsion systems creating a brilliant display of energy against the star field. But humans had taught them a lesson they couldn't adapt to or counter. Sometimes the most effective strategy wasn't about superior technology or tactical brilliance. Sometimes it was about ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things because it was right. The last transmission from a Defiance was Lieutenant Torres, reading the names of his fellow crew members for the record. 43 humans who had chosen to face impossible odds rather than abandon those they had sworn to protect. As the black hole stabilized, consuming the Nexus Gate, the Void Reaper fleet, and the U.S. Defiance, Sarah Chin's evacuation pod was thrown clear by the final gravitational pulse. She watched through tears as the region of space that had been the galaxy's most important transit hub became a monument to human sacrifice. But in the distance, barely visible against the stars, the civilian evacuation fleets continued their journey toward the sanctuary systems. Millions of lives that would survive because 43 humans had decided that some things were worth dying for. The Void Reapers were gone, trapped in a prison of their own making. And the galaxy had learned that sometimes the most primitive species possess something that no amount of technology could replicate: the courage to stand between the darkness and the light, no matter the cost. 6 months after the Battle of the Nexus Gate, Captain Sarah Chun stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council in their rebuilt chambers. The scars from the Void Reaper attacks were still visible throughout Council space, but the galaxy was healing. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the memorial that had been erected at the site of the former gate, a sphere of crystallized space-time that would exist for millennia as a reminder of humanity's sacrifice. The evacuation was successful, Admiral Korvac reported, his translator conveying what humans had learned to recognize as deep respect. 4.7 million civilian vessels reached the sanctuary systems. Every single evacuation fleet survived the journey. He paused. This would not have been possible without the actions of the USS Defiance and her crew. Sarah nodded, though the weight of survival, when so many had died, still pressed heavily on her shoulders. Chief Engineer Martinez and Navigator Singh stood beside her, the only other survivors of their mission. The three of them had been recovered by rescue ships 2 days after the gate's collapse, their evacuation pod barely maintaining life support. The Void Reaper threat has been neutralized, continued Admiral Korvac. Our analysis of the black hole's gravitational field confirms that no escape is possible. The technology they use to consume other civilizations is now permanently contained. A representative from a Centauri Republic stepped forward. Captain Chun, our scientists have studied the tactical record from your engagement. The strategy employed by your crew defied every principle of conventional warfare. How did you know it would work? Sarah almost smiled. Even now, 6 months later, the galaxy's military experts were still trying to understand human tactics. We didn't know it would work. That's the point. I do not understand. Every other species in the galaxy fights wars by analyzing their enemy, identifying weaknesses, and exploiting those weaknesses with superior technology or tactics. Sarah gestured to the holographic display showing the memorial. The Void Reapers could counter that approach because it's logical and predictable. She walked to the center of the chamber, addressing the hundreds of alien delegates who represented dozens of species. Humans don't fight to win. We fight to protect what we love. That means we'll try anything, sacrifice everything, and refuse to accept defeat even when it's the rational choice. But such tactics are inefficient, observed a delegate from the crystalline Xerian hegemony. Your casualty rates are often higher than necessary. Higher than necessary for victory, yes, but not higher than necessary for survival. Sarah's voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. The Void Reapers conquered 43 civilizations before reaching our space. Every one of those species tried to fight efficiently, to minimize losses while maximizing their chances of victory. She activated a control that changed the holographic display to show the strategic overview of the Void Reaper campaign. Red indicators marked conquered worlds and destroyed fleets across a swath of the galaxy. The problem with efficient warfare is that your enemy can predict your moves. They know you won't take unacceptable risks. They know you'll prioritize your own survival over abstract goals. Sarah highlighted the point where the Void Reaper advance had stopped. Humans don't think that way. We'll ram a ship into a space station if we have to. We'll sacrifice everything to destroy an enemy that threatens our people. Admiral Korvac's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was thoughtful consideration. Your species' approach to conflict is unique, but it comes at tremendous cost. How do you justify such losses? Sarah thought of Commander Webb and the crew of the Defiance, spending their last moments ensuring the Void Reapers could never escape their gravitational prison. She thought of the 43 volunteers who had known they were flying to their deaths, but had done it anyway because millions of lives depended on their sacrifice. We justify it because the alternative is unacceptable, she said simply. When someone threatens to destroy everything you care about, you don't calculate acceptable losses. You do whatever it takes to stop them. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Captain Chun, there is something else we must discuss. Sarah turned to see a figure she didn't recognize, tall, ethereal, with features that seemed to shift slightly as she watched. Other delegates stepped back respectfully, and Sarah realized this was a representative of the ancients, the mysterious species that had built the galaxy's gate network thousands of years ago. The Nexus Gate was not merely infrastructure, the ancient continued, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in the very air. It was a seal, containing something far worse than the Void Reapers. The chamber fell silent. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? The Void Reapers were explorers, refugees from a dying realm beyond this galaxy. They consumed matter and energy because their own universe was collapsing. The Ancient moved closer, and Sarah could see stars reflecting in its eyes. But in destroying the gate, you have weakened the barriers between dimensions. Something else is coming. Admiral Korvax's translator struggled with his response. Are you saying that humanity's victory was a mistake? No, the Ancient replied. It was necessary. The Void Reapers would have consumed this galaxy entirely within a decade. But their destruction has created a new challenge. It turned to Sarah. We have monitored your species since your first appearance in galactic space. Your approach to impossible problems is unique among sapient races. What kind of challenge are we facing? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew she wasn't going to like the answer. The entity approaching this dimension feeds on order, on predictability, on the logical structures that hold reality together. The Ancient's form seemed to flicker as it spoke. Traditional warfare, advanced technology, even the weapons we Ancients once wielded, all of these follow patterns it can absorb and turn against us. Sarah understood with growing dread where this was leading. But human tactics are chaotic enough that they cannot be easily absorbed or predicted. The Ancient nodded. Your species has already proven it can defeat enemies that should be impossible to overcome. The question is, will you do so again? Martinez stepped forward. With respect, we've lost most of our fleet, and our home system is still recovering from the Void Reaper attacks. What exactly do you expect us to contribute to a galactic defense? Everything, the Ancient replied. As before, the chamber erupted in discussion as delegates realized the implications. The galaxy was asking humanity, a species that had been considered too primitive to join the Alliance just months before, to lead the defense against another existential threat. Sarah looked around the chamber at faces representing dozens of advanced civilizations, all turning to her for an answer. The weight of expectation was overwhelming, but she thought again of the Defiance and her crew. They had faced impossible odds before and found a way to prevail. How long do we have? The dimensional barriers are weakening steadily. Perhaps 18 months before the entity breaks through completely. 18 months to prepare for an enemy that could absorb and counter any logical strategy. 18 months to find a way to protect not just the galaxy, but the fundamental structures of reality itself. Sarah looked at Martinez and, seeing in their eyes the same grim determination that had carried them through their mission to the Nexus Gate. They were tired, they were outnumbered, and they were facing an enemy beyond conventional comprehension. In other words, exactly the kind of impossible situation humans specialized in. Admiral Korvax will need complete access to galactic military resources and research facilities. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology the Alliance can provide. Sarah's voice carried the authority of someone who had already proven what humans could accomplish when properly motivated. And we'll need them to follow human tactical doctrine, no matter how insane it seems. That is acceptable. What do you require from us? Sarah smiled grimly. Help us figure out how to do something so crazy that it breaks the laws of physics themselves. Because if this entity feeds on order and logic, we're going to have a show at something it's never seen before. She turned to address the full assembly. The Void Reapers learned the hard way that humans don't know when to quit. This new enemy is about to learn the same lesson. We don't fight because we're sure we can win. We fight because giving up is not an option. The chamber fell silent as the delegates contemplated what they were asking of humanity. Another impossible mission. Another sacrifice that could cost everything. But looking at Captain Sarah Chun and her surviving crew, they saw something that no amount of advanced technology could replicate. The absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter the odds. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most primitive solution was exactly what reality needed. And in the chaos that was coming, humanity would prove once again that there was no force in the universe more dangerous than humans with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The next war was coming, but this time, humanity would not stand alone. And perhaps that combination, human unpredictability backed by galactic resources, would be enough to preserve not just their civilizations, but the very fabric of existence itself. The memorial to the Defiant continued to shine in the darkness where the Nexus Gate once stood, a reminder that heroes were not defined by the technology they wielded or the enemies they faced, but by their willingness to stand between the darkness and the light, no matter the cost.